Hey guys, today I'm going to be making a rack in Ableton that's oriented towards helping people mix down their music once they've got something that's almost a finished product. So this only uses Ableton Live devices, but in the future if you get some VSTs that you really like, you can incorporate them into this design. It's open to have stuff added to it. So this is what the rack looks like here. So you can see I've got an effect rack set up. I've named it Mixing Rack. And basically this is the chain of how I would kind of work through my project, okay? So the first thing on the chain is an EQ, because the first thing that you're going to want to do with your sound is you're going to want to EQ it so that it's like, so that once you start layering everything else on it, you've got the nice signal to begin with. There's not much point in putting an effect on something that you're going to cut out. So EQ first. Next comes compression. So now we regulate our volume with the compressor. Then it goes into utility, which has an overall volume gain. I'll talk a little bit more about why that's useful in the future. You've also got a pan, so you can control your stereo. So if you're doing something like in this case, I've got this on percussion. So if I want to pan the percussion left or right, I can use that feature. Then I've got a compressor for side chaining. I have a filter, which is a low pass filter for low passing, and then I've got a high pass filter for high passing. I then have a reverb and a ping pong delay. So this is basically my basic, this is my basic mixing rack that I'm going to teach you guys how to put together in a second. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about, so people ask me the reason why I do certain things quite often, so I'll just elaborate a little more. So the reason why I have the master volume in here, a gain from the compressor, and then we also have the volume on the fader here as well. I don't touch faders when I'm mixing, and that's because the great teacher that I had, David Carboni, taught me to not bother with using the master faders on the channel. Instead, use compressors to regulate your volume, and also in this case I'm using a utility, which is mainly because this glue compressor does not go negative makeup, which is a pain in the ass. I prefer the glue compressor to the regular compressor in Ableton, so I'm using that. But in the perfect world, I would probably be using a FabFilter compressor, and then I would have mapped the makeup to a control over here so that I can regulate the volume just with that rather than using utility gain. So this is just so I can go negative volume if I need to on the, the master volume. If I need to bring the volume of that down, I'll use this. If I want to push this to increase the volume above 0 decibels, then I'll use the gain here on the compressor. Okay, so I've got some of the knobs that I've got mapped. So I've got the master volume from the utility. I've got the low pass filter here mapped. So what you can see that it's turned off at the moment, and when I start to bring this up, it activates it, turns it on. So it's off and it's not coloring our sound at all. And then if I start bringing it on and sweeping it up, it activates as soon as I start moving that knob beyond its resting point, and it'll go all the way, and then it will it won't switch off again because I've just got it so that it goes all the way, and then you can just bring it back. Same deal with the high pass. As soon as you move it, it activates, and then you can use that to filter the sound out. I've got the pan from the utility, so I can go 50 right, 50 left. And then if I go back to default, it goes back to the center, which is really handy. Again, I've got the threshold of the compressor, so I can set, say, a -10 threshold to be affecting the percussion that I've got, and then I can use the gain to increase it in volume because I want it to be louder, maybe. Then I've got wet and dry from reverb, so I can just mix a little bit of reverb into it, and then ping pong, so I can get a bit of ping pong going on. So I've just got this little loop here, so we can sort of get an idea of context where you could be using this. So basically I would copy this mixing rack, and then I would paste it onto every channel with all of the settings zeroed out. So I'm going to now teach you how to make it. I'm going to teach you how to map everything, and I'm going to teach you how to save it so that you can pull it out and use it whenever you want. Okay, so that's a bit of the idea of the practical application, and let's get into actually making it. So I'm going to delete it, and let's start off by going into where do we want to go? We want to go into our effects, and we're going to grab an EQ8, and then we want to grab a glue compressor. Then we want to grab a utility, and then we want to grab 2 auto filters, 1, 2. We want a reverb, and then we want a ping pong delay. And I'm just using standard settings on these effects because I don't think it's important to teach you how to make a good reverb yet, or dial in a good. So we're going to click the ping pong, we're going to hold shift, we're going to click the EQ right at the start, and we're going to go group. Cool. So we're going to group them all into an effect rack. I'm going to blow that effect rack up so that I can see the knobs by clicking the little button here. And then I'm going to go Control R to rename this, and I'm going to go mixing rack. Cool. So I've just named it. Alright, so we're not mapping anything from the EQ because the EQ is something that you would do manually, and I don't think it's necessary to have any of the parameters mapped. That's something that you can get into if you like. We're going to map stuff from the compressor, but we'll do the first things first. So the first thing that typically you're going to be concerned with is, I suppose, the volume. So let's map. So we're going to right click the gain on the utility, and we're going to go map to macro 1. Okay, so that's going to map to macro 1. Let's go ahead and map the pan. So the panorama, we're going to go right click, map that to number 2. We're going to grab we're going to pull the filters down so there's no Q. We're going to change this one so that it's a high pass. Then we're going to right click on the low pass, and we're going to map that to macro 3. And then we're going to right click on the on off button, and we're also going to map that to macro 3, which has renamed itself to frequency. And then we're going to right click on the frequency on the high pass filter. We're going to map that to macro 4. We're going to right click on the on off button, and we're going to map that to macro 4 as well. We're going to right click on the dry wet on the reverb, and we're going to map it to macro 5. We're going to right click on the dry wet on the ping pong delay, and we're going to map that to macro 6. Okay, we're going to just quickly rename that reverb. So again, sorry of reverb, but we're holding Control and we're pressing R or Command R on a Mac. Reverb, and that is ping pong. Cool, and then finally, let's go back to that glue compressor. Threshold can go to 7, and makeup can go to 8. Okay, cool. Alright, so we've got everything mapped, but we want to adjust where everything lives. So you can see right now the gain lives at -30, which isn't all that useful to us. We probably want that to be at a neutral value of 0. We can see that the pan is living at C. We just have to set it to our default. The frequencies and the on-offs aren't set up correctly yet. You can see that filter only, you can tell it turns on when you can see all these things light up. It only turns on when you get it to about 700 hertz, so that's no good for us at the moment. And same deal on here. And the threshold is sitting at, if we set that to default, I probably want that to go the other way, so this would be 0 and that would be -40 rather than the other way around. And the makeup is working fine as it is. So the way we're going to change the way these values are is we're going to right click on one of the things that we're mapping, and we're going to edit macro map. Okay, it's going to open up this window here where we can adjust some of the things. So the first thing we want to change is the gain. So the gain is coming from the utility, so you can see the path says utility, and the gain is the control that we want to manipulate. So we want the minimum value to be 0, and we want the maximum value to be -35. Cool, because we just want to control that up to -0. Great, that's working fine. The pan is fine. The frequency of the filter and the So these control when the device will be turned on for the auto filters, okay? So the way to get the setting working correctly is to go 1, set that 1, and then set the max as 127, and set 1, and then max is 127. Cool. We want the low pass filter to be completely open at resting point, and we want the other filter to be completely open as well at resting point, which it's currently doing, which is great. What else do we need? We want the threshold on the glue compressor. We want that to be 0, and we want the max to be -40. And that looks like it is probably everything that we want to map. So let's undo that. Cool. So the gain, yes, that's working correctly. The pan, yes, that's working correctly. We set that back to default. The frequency, okay. So as soon as I move that, it turns on the filter and it starts cutting out. As soon as I turn that on, it starts cutting out. Great. The reverb is set up. Yep, that's controlling the dry wet. That's perfect. That's really all we want it for. And then threshold, yes, that is working. Makeup, yes, that is working. Cool. So we've got all our knobs working correct. I'm just going to go ahead and collapse everything, okay? So now we've got it in a neutral position, exactly how we want it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to user library. We're going to go to I've made this folder by right-clicking, going new folder, and I wrote in, obviously, custom effect racks. I'm going to grab this mixing rack, and I'm going to drag it in, and it's sitting in there. So I can go onto this other channel now. This is just the drum machine. I can grab the mixing rack, drop it on there, and then I can start adjusting the parameters to affect the hats now. So I could use that to mix those. Okay, so that is the effect rack. And I hope that that's really helpful for you guys, because mixing is a very kind of difficult thing to get a hang of. So I'll show you how I would use this. So what I would do is, let's say I want the, I'll show you the practicality of having the gain separate to the overall level as well, actually. So I want these hats to go from 0 to 100%, so to speak, right? So I want them to go from -35 decibels to 0 decibels, okay, over time. So I'm going to set that as an automation lane, and then it's going to slowly come in. And I would press the little plus button, and now it's got its own little lane that controls that parameter, okay? Next, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to start. Let's just use this as an example. All right, I want it to start in the center, but I want it to pan out to the right. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to, sorry, I'll delete that automation. So I'm going to click the parameter that I want to map. I'm going to select the area that I want to map it around. And then I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click that little line. I'm going to drag it up. Then I'm going to drop that node. I'm going to drop that node. Cool. So it's going to start in the center. And it's going to work its way out. And then let's say we'll bring it back to the center after. I'm not going to be able to get that exact. Oh, I am too. Cool. And then it's, okay, we'll slowly bring it back to the center. And then I'll drop that down, and now that's got its own little lane. And it's got its little name here, so you know, okay, that's controlling the gain. That's controlling the panorama. Let's listen to this. Okay, so now we're going to say, I've automated the volume fade, and that's great. But I actually want it to be louder than what it is. And if I was only using this, I would have to completely redo my automation, because my volume automation. But because we've done it with the utility, now what we can do is we can just grab the makeup and we can set it at a level that we think is appropriate to be sitting in the mix. Obviously that's, you know, extremely loud, but set it about there. Okay, cool, that sounds like it's sitting nicely with my kick and bass. So I still have kept the slow fade in, but I've now set a new level for it to sit at as its regular volume that sits nicely in my mix. So that is an example of how I would use it. I would just continue doing that. So I'd drop down something for the frequency and I'd say, okay, right at the end I want to filter it out. So I'd go ahead and do that, and that filter would turn itself on, and then it'll slowly filter out. The reason we want the filters off is so they don't color the sound. So they just turn on as soon as we actually want to use them, so they start coloring the sound. Okay, cool. I hope that was helpful for you guys. It's probably been a pretty long video, so I hope you've enjoyed it. And subscribe, leave me a message, like the video, and I'll catch you in the next video.